The champagne glass slipped from my sister Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers, shattering against the marble floor of our parents' estate. The entire engagement party, 43 of the city's most prominent families, turned to stare at the mess spreading across the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars. "What did you just say?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible over the classical quartet playing in the corner. I kept my phone pressed to my ear, maintaining eye contact with my sister as I spoke clearly into the device. "Yes, Mr. Patterson, this is Elena Castellanos. I need you to contact the Henderson family immediately and inform them that Rosewood Manor is no longer available for their June wedding. The property is being sold effective immediately." My mother, Catherine Henderson, pushed through the crowd of shocked guests, her face flushed with embarrassment and rage. "Elena, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Put that phone away this instant." I held up one finger, the same dismissive gesture Victoria had used on me countless times growing up. "Mr. Patterson, please also cancel their catering contracts, floral arrangements and security deposits. All vendors should be notified by morning." "Yes, I understand this is unusual, but as the owner I have that right." "Owner?" Victoria's voice cracked like a teenager's. "You don't own anything. You live in that pathetic studio apartment and drive a car from 2015. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the past 3 years, while my family assumed I was struggling as a freelance graphic designer, I had been systematically building a real estate empire that now controlled half the premium venues in the city. Rosewood Manor, the crown jewel of wedding locations, had been my most recent acquisition, purchased through my holding company Castellanos Properties just 6 months ago. "Elena, hang up that phone right now," my father Richard commanded from across the room, his authoritative CO voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "You're embarrassing your sister on her special day." I ended the call and slipped my phone into my clutch, savoring the moment of absolute silence that followed. 43 sets of eyes stared at me like I had just announced I was joining the circus. "Embarrassing," I repeated softly. "Like how you embarrassed me 20 minutes ago when you announced to everyone that I'm the family disappointment, who couldn't even afford to be a proper bridesmaid?" Victoria's fiancé, Bradley Morrison III, heir to the Morrison Hotel fortune, stepped forward with that practiced smile he'd perfected at country club galas. "Elena, surely we can work something out. This is just a misunderstanding." I laughed, a sound that carried more satisfaction than any champagne toast. "Oh, Bradley, there's no misunderstanding. I heard every word perfectly clearly. Victoria said I should know my place, and be grateful you're even allowing me to attend the wedding as a guest instead of working it." The memory of that conversation still burned. Victoria had gathered her bridesmaids, 6 perfectly groomed women who had never worked a day in their lives, and announced my demotion from maid of honor to regular guest with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. "She can't afford the bridesmaid dress anyway," Victoria had declared, examining her engagement ring in the light. "The designer charges $8,000 per dress, and we all know Elena's financial situation." What Victoria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I could have bought her entire wedding 20 times over without touching my investment accounts. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Patterson: "Henderson wedding cancelled. All vendors notified. Property showing scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Shall I contact Sotheby's for the listing?" I typed back quickly, "Not yet. I might have a better idea." "Elena, this has gone far enough," my mother hissed, grabbing my arm with fingers that dug in like talons. "Victoria's wedding is in 6 weeks. You cannot seriously be doing this over some petty argument." "Petty?" I pulled my arm free and something in my voice made the room go even quieter. "Mom, you stood there and laughed when Victoria said I should be grateful for the scraps of affection this family throws my way. You nodded when she suggested I might be more useful working the coat check than sitting with the family." Bradley cleared his throat nervously. "Look, perhaps we should all take a step back. Elena, I'm sure we can find another venue just as nice." "Just as nice." I turned to face him fully. "Bradley, do you know how many 5-star venues are available for weekend weddings in June? In this city?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I'm sure there are options." "0, I interrupted. "There are 0 available venues that meet your standards. Rosewood Manor was booked 18 months in advance. The waiting list for cancellations is longer than your family's membership roster at the yacht club." Victoria's face had gone from pale to an alarming shade of green. But all our invitations already went out. The save the dates, the formal invitations, the hotel room blocks. Everything says Rosewood Manor. That does sound like a problem, I agreed pleasantly. Though I'm sure a creative person could figure something out. Maybe you could get married in the ballroom at one of Bradley's family hotels? Oh wait, those are all booked for corporate events, aren't they? Bradley's jaw tightened. How did you know about? I know quite a bit about the hospitality industry, Bradley. It's amazing what you learn when you actually work for a living instead of just inheriting everything. My father stepped forward, his face red with the kind of anger that usually made employees scramble for cover. Elena Margaret Henderson, you will call that venue manager back immediately and restore your sister's wedding. This childish tantrum ends now. The use of my full name was supposed to transport me back to childhood, to make me cower like I had when I was 8 years old and broke his golf trophy. Instead, it just reminded me of how many years I had spent trying to earn approval from people who saw me as fundamentally less valuable than my siblings. Actually, Dad, it's Elena Margaret Castellanos now. I legally changed my name when I incorporated my business. Seemed appropriate since I was building something that would actually last, unlike the Henderson reputation for treating family members like servants. What business? Victoria demanded, her voice climbing toward hysteria. You don't have a business. You design websites for small companies. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my banking app. The screen showed a balance that made Victoria's trust fund look like pocket change. You're partially right. I do design websites. For my own companies. 12 of them to be exact. I turned the phone so the entire group could see the account balance. $4.7 million in liquid assets, with a note indicating this was just one of 7 accounts. That's not possible, my mother stammered. We monitor your credit reports. We know about your finances. You monitor Elena Henderson's credit reports, I corrected. Elena Castellanos has been building an empire for the past 3 years while you all assumed I was struggling. Would you like to see the property portfolio? Before anyone could answer, I opened another app showing the real estate holdings. 15 commercial properties, 8 residential buildings, and 5 luxury venues spread across 3 states. The total value displayed at the bottom made several guests audibly gasp. $42 million in real estate assets, I announced to the room. Plus the stock portfolio, the cryptocurrency investments, and the 3 businesses I'm in the process of selling to major corporations. Victoria collapsed into the nearest chair, her massive engagement ring catching the light as her hands shook. But how? You never showed any interest in business. I showed plenty of interest, I replied. Every time I tried to talk about my ideas at family dinners, you told me to leave the business talk to the adults. Every time I asked Dad about his work, he said I wouldn't understand the complexities. Every time I suggested getting involved with the family investments, Mom said I should focus on finding a husband instead. The truth was, they had systematically excluded me from every conversation about money, business, or planning for the future. Victoria got an internship at Dad's company the summer she turned 16. Our brother Marcus was given a seat on the board of the family foundation when he graduated college. I was told to major in something practical but feminine, and maybe marry someone who could support me properly. So I decided to support myself, I continued. Turns out when you're not handed everything, you get creative. When you're not protected from failure, you learn to build things that actually work. Bradley found his voice again, though it came out smaller than before. Elena, surely we can work something out. What would it take for you to reconsider? Reconsider what, exactly? The venue. Your sister's wedding. This is supposed to be the happiest day of her life. I looked at Victoria, who was still staring at my phone screen like it might suddenly reveal this was all an elaborate prank. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy that had gotten me into this situation in the first place. Victoria, I said quietly, do you remember what you told me when I asked if I could bring a guest to your engagement party? She looked up with confused eyes. No, I don't. You said that plus ones were for people who mattered. You said that since I didn't have a serious relationship or career success worth celebrating, it would be awkward to explain my guest to your friends. The memory hung in the air like smoke. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, probably remembering their own conversations where I had been discussed like a charity case or family obligation. You want to know what would make me reconsider? I continued. An apology. A real one. Not because you need something from me, but because you recognize that you've spent years treating me like I was worth less than the rest of the family. Victoria's mouth opened but no sound came out. Around the room I could see people calculating, wondering if they had also underestimated the quiet Henderson daughter who never seemed to amount to much. My phone buzzed with another text from Mr. Patterson. Received 3 calls in the past 10 minutes from families interested in purchasing Rosewood Manor. Should I schedule additional showings? I showed the text to Victoria, whose face somehow went even paler. 3 families already want to buy it, I explained. Once word gets out that one of the city's most exclusive venues is for sale, there'll be a bidding war. I'll probably clear $60 million on the sale. $60 million? Bradley's voice cracked slightly. For one property? Location, I said with a shrug. Though I suppose you understand that better than most given your family's hotel business. Speaking of which, how is the Morrison Group handling the news about their failed expansion into European markets? Bradley's face went white. How did you? That information isn't public. I have diverse investment interests, I replied vaguely. Amazing what you hear in business circles when you're actually part of them instead of just pretending to be. The truth was even simpler. I had purchased shares in Morrison Group's main competitor 6 months ago. When you own enough stock in a company, you get access to a lot of industry intelligence. My father found his voice again, though it had lost most of its commanding authority. Elena, if you have this kind of money, why have you been living like a college student? The apartment, the car, the modest lifestyle? Because money doesn't automatically make you a better person, Dad. I've watched you use wealth as a weapon for my entire life. Victoria thinks money makes her superior to everyone else. Marcus believes he's entitled to respect he hasn't earned just because he has access to family accounts. I gestured around the opulent room with its crystal chandeliers and imported artwork. All of this? It's beautiful, but it's also a cage. You're so worried about maintaining your position that you've forgotten how to be decent human beings. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? Mom, when was the last time you asked me about my life without immediately suggesting ways I should change it? When have any of you celebrated my achievements instead of pointing out my failures? The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable even for the guests, who had presumably come for champagne and gossip, not family therapy. Victoria finally found her voice. Elena, I didn't know you felt. Felt what? Excluded? Diminished? Treated like the family disappointment. I shook my head. Victoria, you announced my demotion from maid of honor to regular guest in front of 6 people without even telling me first. You literally said the words, Elena will understand, she's used to disappointment. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. My voice was gentle but firm. You meant every word. Just like you meant it when you told Bradley's parents that I was the artistic one, who would probably never get married. Just like you meant it when you suggested I might be more comfortable at the children's table during Christmas dinner because I don't have adult achievements to discuss. Victoria's perfect composure finally cracked. Tears started streaming down her face, carrying her carefully applied mascara with them. I'm sorry, she whispered. Elena, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never asked, I replied. None of you asked what I was working on, what I cared about, what I was building. You just assumed that because I wasn't following the family playbook I must be failing. Bradley stepped closer to Victoria, his arm going around her shoulders in a gesture that looked more protective than supportive. What would it take, he asked quietly, for you to let Victoria have her wedding? I considered the question seriously. Around the room I could see family, friends and relatives watching this drama unfold like it was dinner theater. Some looked scandalized, others fascinated, and a few appeared to be taking notes for future gossip sessions. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the room. Victoria, you have 48 hours to personally call every vendor, every bridesmaid and every family member who heard you humiliate me tonight. You're going to apologize for your behavior and explain that you were wrong about my circumstances. Elena, that's, my father started. I held up a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. Dad, you're going to offer me a formal position on the board of Henderson Industries with full voting rights and a salary commensurate with my business experience. Not as a favor, but as recognition that I've built something significant. His mouth opened to object, but I continued. Mom, you're going to help me plan a celebration of my actual achievements. Not a party where I'm the guest of honor because you feel guilty, but a business networking event where I can introduce my companies to potential partners and clients. I turned back to Victoria, who was staring at me with a mixture of awe and terror. And Victoria, you're going to mean every apology you make. Because if I find out you're just going through the motions to get your venue back, I'll not only sell Rosewood Manor, I'll buy the Morrison family's hotel chain and turn it into budget accommodations. Bradley made a choking sound. You couldn't possibly. Want to test that theory? I asked pleasantly. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my business manager, confirming tomorrow's acquisition meeting. The Morrison Group has agreed to all terms. Congratulations on expanding into the hospitality sector. I turned the phone so Bradley could see the message. His face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a sickly yellow. The Morrison Group expansion I mentioned? I explained to the room. I'm not just aware of their financial difficulties. As of tomorrow morning, I'll own controlling interest in their company. Turns out, when you diversify your investments properly, you can acquire almost anything. Victoria looked from me to Bradley and back again, her brain clearly struggling to process this information. You're buying Bradley's family business? I'm investing in it, I corrected. There's a difference. The Morrison Group has good bones but poor management. With the right leadership and strategic planning, it could be very profitable. What does that mean for? Victoria gestured vaguely between herself and Bradley. It means your fiancé is about to learn what it feels like to work for his money instead of inheriting it, I replied. But if he's as smart and capable as he claims to be, he'll do just fine. Bradley's jaw worked like he was chewing something unpleasant. This is revenge. No, this is business, I corrected. Revenge would be buying your family's company and running it into the ground out of spite. Instead, I'm going to turn it into something successful while teaching you humility in the process. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the shocked faces of people who had written me off years ago. I'm going to leave now. Victoria, you have 48 hours to decide whether you want Rosewood Manor for your wedding or not. The choice is entirely yours. I started toward the door, then paused. Oh, and for everyone wondering, yes, I've been recording this conversation. Not for blackmail, but because I wanted to have evidence of what actually happened here tonight. Amazing how differently people remember things when money is involved. As I reached the door, my mother called out desperately, Elena, wait. We can talk about this. We can work something out. I turned back one last time. Mom, we could have talked about this any time in the past 3 years. But talking requires listening, and listening requires believing that the other person might have something valuable to say. We're listening now, my father said quietly. Because you have to, I replied. Because I have something you want. That's not the same thing as respect. I walked out of my parents' house and into the cool evening air, leaving behind 43 witnesses to the moment the Henderson family's failure became their most successful member. My phone immediately started buzzing with calls and text, but I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to my real home, not the studio apartment I maintained as cover, but the penthouse condo I'd purchased 18 months ago. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the lights of the city I was quietly reshaping, one investment at a time. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from family members and 42 text messages. Victoria's were the most frantic, alternating between apologies and threats to increasingly desperate pleas for forgiveness. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Mr. Patterson. Miss Castellanos, I have some interesting news about Rosewood Manor. Let me guess, I said, settling into my office chair with a cup of coffee. Multiple offers? 7 families want to buy it, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that the Henderson family has offered to purchase it themselves for twice the asking price. I nearly choked on my coffee. My family wants to buy my property? Apparently, they've secured emergency funding from 3 different sources. They're offering $75 million cash, no inspection, closing within 2 weeks. $75 million. They were willing to overpay by $15 million just to ensure Victoria could have her dream wedding. The same family who had spent years telling me I didn't understand the value of money. Mr. Patterson, please decline their offer. Ma'am? They're offering significantly more than market value. I know. Decline it anyway and schedule a meeting with the Henderson family for this afternoon. Tell them the property is no longer for sale. It's not. I smiled, looking out at the city skyline. No, it's not. I've decided to keep it and start a new business venture. Elite event planning with a focus on supporting women entrepreneurs. What I didn't tell Mr. Patterson was that I had a different plan entirely. Victoria would get her dream wedding at Rosewood Manor, but she would also get something she had never experienced before: the knowledge that her happiness depended on someone else's generosity. At 3 p.m., my entire family sat in the conference room of my downtown office building, a property they were just now learning I owned. Victoria had clearly been crying for hours. My parents looked like they hadn't slept. Only Marcus seemed relatively composed, though he kept staring around the room like he was trying to calculate its value. Thank you all for coming, I began formally. I understand you wanted to discuss the Rosewood Manor situation. Elena, please, Victoria interrupted immediately. I've called everyone. I apologized to the bridesmaids, to Bradley's family, to every guest who was there last night. I meant every word. I studied her face carefully. The tears looked genuine, but more importantly, there was something different in her eyes. Something that might have been actual remorse instead of just desperation. What did you tell them exactly? I told them that I had been cruel and dismissive toward you for years because I was jealous and insecure. I told them that you had built something incredible while I was just spending family money, and acting like that made me important. That was better than I had expected. And the bridesmaids? I offered to pay for their dresses regardless of whether the wedding happens. I told them that if they can't support me after learning about my behavior, I understand. How many are still willing to be in your wedding? Victoria's voice got very small. 3 out of 6. I nodded approvingly. The ones who stayed are probably the only real friends you had anyway. My father cleared his throat. Elena, about the board position. Dad, let's be clear about something. I don't need a position on your board. My companies generate more revenue than Henderson Industries. I'm offering you the opportunity to benefit from my expertise, not the other way around. He blinked several times, processing this information. I see. Do you? Because 48 hours ago, you were lecturing me about business like I was still 12 years old. Marcus finally spoke up. Elena, I owe you an apology too. We've all been condescending, dismissive, treating me like the family pet who occasionally does cute tricks. He winced. Yes. All of that. I looked around the table at 4 faces that suddenly seemed much younger and more uncertain than they had my entire life. These were the people whose approval I had chased for 28 years, and now they were sitting in my conference room asking for my forgiveness. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. Victoria, you can have your wedding at Rosewood Manor. Same date, same arrangements, everything exactly as planned. Relief flooded her face so completely that she started crying again. However, I continued, there are conditions. First, this is not a gift. You will pay fair market rate for the venue, $200,000 for the weekend, plus all associated costs. Victoria nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely, whatever you think is fair. Second, instead of wedding gifts, all guests will be asked to make donations to a scholarship fund I'm establishing for young women starting their own businesses. That's beautiful, she whispered. Third, your wedding will be featured in a business magazine article about the importance of supporting family members' entrepreneurial endeavors. You'll be interviewed about how you initially failed to recognize and encourage my business success. This time Victoria hesitated, probably calculating how much public embarrassment she was willing to endure for her dream wedding. And fourth, I continued, Marcus will work for me for 1 year as an entry-level employee in my property management company. Same salary as any other new hire, same expectations, same accountability. Marcus opened his mouth to object, then seemed to think better of it. What would I be doing? Learning how businesses actually work from the ground up. Customer service, maintenance coordination, financial tracking, vendor management. All the unglamorous stuff that makes companies profitable. And if I refuse? I shrugged. Then you refuse. But you'll never work in this city's business community again, because I now have enough influence to make that happen. Your choice. The room was quiet for a long moment while everyone processed their options. Elena, my mother said softly, what about us? Your father and me. I had been thinking about this question since I left their house the night before. You're going to learn to treat me like an adult family member instead of a charity case. That means no more unsolicited advice about my life choices, no more comparisons to Victoria's achievements, and no more assumptions about my financial situation. We can do that, she said quickly. Can you? Because Mom, just last month you suggested I might want to consider going back to school for something more practical than art. You had no idea I was already running multiple successful companies. She looked down at her hands. I thought I was being helpful. You thought I was failing, so you felt entitled to fix me. There's a difference. My father leaned forward in his chair. Elena, I want you to know that the board position offer was genuine. Not because you're family, but because anyone who built what you've built clearly understands business at a level we need. I appreciate that, Dad. I'll consider it. The meeting continued for another hour, working out details and setting expectations. By the end, everyone looked emotionally exhausted but cautiously optimistic. As they prepared to leave, Victoria hung back. Elena, can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you just destroy us? You could have. Last night proved you have the power to ruin everything we care about. I considered the question carefully. Because revenge would have been easy, and easy doesn't create anything lasting. This way you learn something. You grow. Maybe you become the kind of person who deserves the privileges you were born with. She nodded slowly. I want to be that person. Then prove it. Not just for the next 6 weeks until your wedding, but for the rest of your life. 6 weeks later, Victoria's wedding at Rosewood Manor was featured in 3 business magazines and raised over $200,000 for the scholarship fund. The bridesmaids who stayed were her real friends. The ones who left had apparently been more interested in the social status than the actual friendship. Marcus lasted 8 months in my property management company before I promoted him to assistant manager. He never asked for special treatment and he never complained about starting at the bottom. Most surprisingly, he turned out to be good at it. My parents kept their word about treating me differently, though it took time for all of us to learn new patterns. Sunday family dinners became something I actually enjoyed attending instead of enduring. And Bradley? Well, working for me instead of inheriting everything turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to him. He discovered he was actually quite talented when he applied himself, and the Morrison Group's profits increased by 40% in the first year under my ownership. But the real victory wasn't the money or the power or even the public vindication. It was the morning I woke up and realized I finally had the thing I'd been chasing my entire life. A family that saw me for who I actually was, not who they thought I should be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just refusing to accept less than you deserve and building something so successful that everyone else has to recalibrate their understanding of who you really are.